Hello, welcome to my first official video of my series on creating Portal 2 maps inside of the Hammer editor. Basically the first series about this isn't 9 or 11 years old. Today we'll be starting from scratch and installing the Portal 2 authoring tools, learning how the Hammer editor works, and creating our first room. Before we begin, this video will assume that you have at least some basic knowledge of Portal 2 and the program installed. Also, if you haven't played through the whole game before, ensure you do that first to avoid spoilers. Now, let's begin. To begin, launch Steam and navigate to the Library tab. Then, search for Portal 2 or Portal 2 authoring tools. Click on it and select Launch. You will then get this menu which has 3 categories. Most of the tools, except for the Hammer editor and the example content you won't need to use, but we'll cover them anyway. First, we have the Applications category with the Hammer World editor. This is the primary tool we'll be using in this series, and the tool we will start each episode with. I will come back to this later. Then, we have the Model Viewer. If I open it, you can see that it says Half-Life Model Viewer, and this is because the tool is mainly used for Half-Life and other games, not Portal 2. So we won't need this for the series, but if you want more information, check out the link on the screen. Next is the Face Poser. This is not used for Portal 2, but mainly for source games with humans with animated faces. Onto the Documentation category. There is a Getting Started guide, which tells you a more basic version of what I'm already telling you. The Example content opens up an example content folder in your Portal 2 files, including maps. Finally, in Utilities, the SketchUp plugins opens a folder for creating 3D content in source games. You can find more about this in the README file over here, but we won't use this for this series. One more thing before we get to the Hammer editor. To create video cutscenes, there is another tool on Steam called Source Filmmaker. We will go over this in a later episode, but since it is a big install, you can install it from this link on the screen. Anyway, now let's open the Hammer editor. As you can see, there currently isn't much to see. Let's create a new map. To do this, select File in the top menu bar, then New. You can also use a Control N shortcut. Now there is a lot of options. Let's begin with the viewport. There are 4 windows. The top left one shows in 3D. The top right one shows a bird's eye view, or the XY plane. The bottom left one shows a front view, or the YZ plane. And the bottom right one shows a side view, or XZ plane. If you hover over the top corner of any of the views, you can select this bit of text and click on it. It will bring up a menu to change the type of viewport. I would recommend leaving the 2D viewports the same. You can change the 3D viewport to wireframe, flat, textured, shaded textured polygons, light map, grid, or smooth. I would recommend generally using 3D textured. On the side, we have the sidebar. The first tool is the selection tool. You simply use this to select stuff and then resize it, move it, and rotate it. The next tool is the magnifying tool, and unless you don't have a scroll wheel, it's not that useful, because the mouse wheel scrolls in and out on 2D viewports, and this does the same thing. You just use the left and right mouse buttons to zoom in and out. The camera tool sets the default point of view every time you open your map. As you see, I can edit it like this. And unless everything is far away, you shouldn't have to use this. The point entity tool is very important. It allows you to create anything that isn't a block, like mashy spike plates, a player spawn, puzzle elements, other .vmf files, and more. To use it, tap in a 2D view and press enter to place one. You can also tap directly in the 3D view to add one. By default, the entity is for a player start, but you can change it here upon placing it, or on the entity's properties once you placed it. The next tool is important. It's the block tool. This creates world brushes, or just brushes, which are basically blocks that you can texture. You can not only create cuboids, but also other shapes like spheres, which you can input down here, and as well as a number of faces. You can drag to make an object, but only in the 2D views. Press enter to confirm your object. You can still edit it using the selection tool. Anyway, the face edit tool is up next. You can select an object's face and then browse for a texture and apply it to the face of your object. It's pretty simple, but we'll give more on this later. Next is the apply a current texture tool. It's like the face edit tool, but gives the face a selected texture on the right here. For instance, I can select this and then select this tool to immediately apply this texture to there. The tool after that is the decal tool, which creates an info decal entity. An example of this would be like using to add bullet holes to something, which so it's not too important for Portal 2, but you'd probably prefer to use overlays for most things, which is the next tool. This tool is like the decal tool but has more controls but takes more resources. It creates an info overlay, which you can simply apply a texture to that. And if I do this correctly, well, you can basically just apply a texture to something else using overlays. And there is also the clipping tool, which removes edges from your blocks. And remember that you can't go wrong with the clipping tool. So basically, you can't go wrong with compiling an invalid shapes. But the next tool can, which is the vertex manipulation tool. This allows you to completely customize and change your shapes, including making invalid structures, so be careful. Most of these will be fixed when you compile or reopen your map in Hammer though. There is one more option, which is probably blank, and this is for using a program called Maya for creating custom models. This is currently beyond the scope of this video and series. Finally, if you don't know how something works, you can always check the Valve Developer Community Wiki. Now let's move on to this top menu bar. The file menu allows you to make a new map, open a map, close the current map, save your map with a different name, and stuff like that. The version control and export settings we won't look at now and are not needed right now. The run map compiles and runs your map, but you can also use F9 for this. This option over here, convert WAD to VMT, I think is a legacy option and you won't need it at all. Reload sounds, just reload your sounds in case something's wrong with them. And the next four will probably not be there, but it's the four most recently open maps that you've made. None of these might appear if it's your first time using Hammer though. And finally, exit, just exit the whole Hammer editor. The edit function has undo and redo functions, as well as a button to disable them for some reason, I don't know why. Find entities allows you to find entities with specific names. Replaces a standard replace function, and you got cut, copy, paste special, and delete, which are pretty standard functions. You also have clear selection, which doesn't actually delete anything, removes something called section handles. Select all just selects all, but note that it doesn't use the shortcut Control A. And finally, property allows you to view a point entity's properties, but another way to do this is to double click the entity in 3D views, or right click and select property in 2D views. For the rest of the menus, I'm not going to talk about everything, that's not too important. I'll just leave a link down below for anyone that wants to read the whole thing. In map, make sure snap to grid and show grid are enabled, as they're very important. In grid settings, you can change the grid size, but I would recommend using these bracket keys instead, because it's a lot more simpler. For anything else that's important, check for problems is pretty important, because it can find compiling errors, and if you just click on it and there's no errors, it will just say no errors were found. Pretty simple. Also, loading and reloading your point file, or loading and unloading your point file, are also very important, because this shows you where the leaks in your maps are. We'll talk about more on leaks later. In view auto size for views can be helpful, but I don't understand why Control A is for this instead of select all. Anyway, go to coordinates can be useful for larger maps. You can go to a direct set of coordinates. And that's probably about it. Most of these others aren't actually that useful. In tool, carve is very useful, allowing you to use a shape to carve into another shape. And you shouldn't use make hollow much. Just make the edges yourself for better control and texturing. It's just a lot easier. There's also transform to rotate and more accurately and move precisely objects and point entities like that. And there's not really anything else important for now, except for help. There's a link to the VDC Wiki over here. Moving on to this bar, which has some important features. These toggle your grids for 2D and 3D views, so I wouldn't recommend touching them. These change the grid sizes. The next one, load and save your window state, which aren't that necessary. Undo and redo, the color tool, group and ungroup, plus a group ignore. Some viz group settings, which we'll also talk about in a different episode. Cut, copy and paste. Chord and editing tools, you won't need them. Select by handles only. Texture lock settings, toggle weld and face alignment for textures, displacement options, which Portal 2 doesn't really use, compiling your map, and a few more other settings that aren't needed. And the status bar down here only has a few options. If an object is selected, it will display the type down here, and it will also show the mouse coordinates within your 2D views. This gives you information like angle, width, height about an object. This shows how far you're zoomed in, and this is about the snap to grid and other grid settings. Other bars, like over here, just have basic texture selecting other features. That's about it for the bars, at least for this episode. Okay, now we're more directly going to talk about the brush/block tool. You can select it and drag a box onto one of the grids, which is pretty easy. Also, to move around the 2D viewports and 3D viewports, you can hold space and use left, not right though, to move around in these. Also hold space and click mouse to right to orientate around a point, or just move like this. Left to move and look around, and you can also use the arrow keys to move around too. So creating our object, we can just select the object tool and drag something a bit like this. Make it a bit bigger over here on this viewpoint. And then bam, we have this, and then we can click enter to confirm this, and you can grab the selection tool if we're not happy, change a bunch of things including rotation and also some other weird stuff like this, so probably don't play with that, because every time you click this it will rotate through resizing settings, rotation and that weird stuff to make like that. I don't really have anything more detailed. Pretty simple. Like for texturing, you can just open up this text edit sheet, and you don't have to worry about most of this. If the textures don't work when you apply what's not even, click this L button, then the T button, but only once you apply the texture. And to do that, you just hit browse here and find a texture that you want. For instance, if I want to do portable surface, then search up plaster there and do something like this plaster wall here, hit apply, and then you can do these settings if you need to. Also make sure when you're using that tool you select something for it to work. Okay, I'll also talk more about the point entity tool. So I'll place an info player start right here with some glasses. So this is where the player will start. You can use the selection tool, move this around and do whatever. You can, I think, resize it, but probably not recommended if you can do that, because it could mess up a few things. Might not be able to resize. You can't resize it, but you can move it around and put it in different places. So let's say we want to, our player won't start with a portal gun, so to do that I can go over here and go weapon portal gun and hit enter, and I'll place it. So what I can go ahead and do is now I can just move it onto my info player start. If I expand my grid, place it somewhere probably near the hand, but it doesn't matter at all, just so the player can pick it up, just so the player will automatically pick it up when the map runs. And I can also right click it here and go properties. I can change what type of it is, and also if it can fire can it create blue portals or red portals, which are the orange portals. I can choose if I want to do that. I'll just say yes, and that's pretty much the point entity tool. It gets a lot more advanced with like outputs and inputs. That's sort of how you can use like buttons to control doors. That's basically what that does, and these aren't as useful right now. Model flags and vis group. Also make sure smart edit is enabled, otherwise it'll just give you a bunch of this stuff, and it'll be easier if you have smart edit on, because it just makes it easier to read. Now we're moving on to what actually leaks is. So if I save my map as something like test 05, then it's saved now, and I can click F9 to compile it. These settings are fine. If I try to compile it, the compiler will fail. And there's a reason why it fails, and that is because of leaks. So I'm gonna load my point file to see where the leak actually is, and it's here. But technically it's everywhere, because anytime like anything like this for the object is safe, but anything exposed to the void. So currently we're exposed to the void all out here, so that's not gonna work because it just can't compile properly. So that's what a leak is. So to fix it, we'll need a whole room. I am gonna use the make hollow tool just to do this, but I'm gonna use the object tool to create something about here. Click to make an object, and then go to tools, and actually let me resize my object because it's not very thick. There we go. Now I go to tools and can make hollow with about 32 thick walls is fine. So now we do actually have a room with no leaks. So now if I try compiling it, it should successfully compile and will open up Portal 2. Okay, and for some reason it didn't work. I'll try relaunching Portal 2. I haven't had that happen before, but I don't know why. Okay, so if this happens, you can probably just restart your computer or restart Steam or something like that. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so I found out what was the issue, and when I started it up, it asked me if I'd like to remove an invalid solid. So if you remember my first object that I placed, it was actually invalid because I think I used a few like vertex manipulation. How do you pronounce that tool? The vertex tool. So I think that might have been why it didn't compile properly, but now it should. Okay, so I'm in the world now. The player start got moved somewhere else, but I can see the portal gun over there, so I can go grab that. Now these are portable surfaces, so I can go like if I want to. It is a pretty big space, but big is good. So anyway, now we're gonna go on and create our first level. So I'm gonna create out of Portal 2, and I think I'm gonna create a new map for my level. Okay, so before I create my map in Hammer, I'm actually gonna first plan out the chamber I want to make inside of actual Portal 2. So I'm gonna create my test chamber and just create a new test chamber. Okay, so I'm gonna name it. So go save, and I can just call it something like first level 00. I don't need a description if I don't want to have one. And now I actually have to plan what I want my puzzle to be about. So I'll quickly create a basic one. Also a quick note, like this observation room that you have to have, when creating in Hammer, you don't have to have any observation rooms if you really don't want to. Remember, you can customize every single element, and it's so much more advanced than this. You can have catwalks, more customizable panels, really anything that you want. So just keep that in mind. This is just for a basic plan. Hello everyone. When I was recording this segment, for some reason my microphone wasn't working, so unfortunately I don't have the correct footage. Well, I do, but not the audio. Basically, all I was really saying is that, like, my light strips weren't working, and when I was going to build my chamber, I was going to move the hard light bridge projector down. That was about it. Okay, so creating our first level, I just did the whole thing, but my microphone wasn't recording. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new map for that, and hopefully I'm actually recording. Okay, so we need 128 by 128 textures, and on our actual Portal 2 level that we designed, it was 7 by 128, so that's 896. So I'm gonna draw that 896 across. And let's find our 3D view up here, and across over here. I'm gonna make it 6 times 128, so 768. Just reset that. 768 by what was it again? I forgot. 896. There. And I can make it at 128 thick, but it doesn't really matter. Try to at least 64 though, I'd say. And also then you can go select like a wall texture on the side here, and go for like this texture, and select this to apply it. And our texture is not equal, so I'm going to use face edit tool to hopefully select every face, and then go LT, hit apply. You don't really need to hit apply, but I do it anyway. And now our textures are perfectly aligned. So I'm going to grab this block. Actually no, I create a new one up here that's about 4 high, which is 4 by 128, which is 512, and that seems to work perfectly. Then again, the textures are not lined up, so I'll fix that again. And for our next wall, I'm just gonna duplicate this. So hold shift, drag this across, and let go. Make sure you stop holding the left mouse button before you stop holding shift, otherwise it won't duplicate. And I can go duplicate this again, click here, and rotate. Now yours might only rotate by 1 unit at a time, or something less, and might be hard to control. So I'd recommend going into Tools, Options, 2D Views, and making sure default to 15-degree rotation is on. It's just going to make it a lot easier to do everything, and you don't have to use the transform tool all the time, which you can do by right clicking and hitting transform. For more accurate rotations, you are going to have to use that tool, and we'll use it a lot later. But now I can correctly position my wall, I think. I'm doing it on the wrong dimension, so let's fix that. Doing something like this. Okay, I'm just gonna delete that and try again. I don't know what happened now. Okay, so hold this, hold shift again, drag it out, and on this screen I want to rotate it to there. Go back and then go back to there and drag it out like that, and then hold shift and copy it to the other side. I also have to move these two both down. It's about there. And move this one across. I didn't line those up very well, but now they are perfect. I can select this floor and also duplicate it up to here. So now we have a full first level. We can also place an info player start to, so our player somewhere to begin their level, and I can also give them, if I go selection and then double click, I can make this other one a weapon portal gun. Make sure it has full functionality, and then if I expand my grid, I can move it over to my player. Ensure it is positioned correctly, and save this as first level. And another thing, it did say overwrite for me, but as I already said, I had to refilming this section. Another thing is where you save it, the default location of an instances folder. If you save it somewhere else, make sure you copy this instances folder over there too, as it contains a bunch of stuff like elevators, doors, buttons, chamber hallways, stuff like that. Okay, finally. There's a bunch of textures over here, like including portal textures. It's just an important thing to notice. There's so many textures. We'll fix most of those later, including making these wall or floor textures, but you should be able to find them anyway. Next episode will focus on button and doors elements, so we're also making bases so we can make the buttons look a lot more neater, and we'll basically fully make portals. We'll also make sure we have our chambers. To get to the elevator, the access panel is about 128 by 128, which is one of these. So yeah, we'll go ahead and focus on that. So see you then.